What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Mark Big Show. I hope you got a chance to check out episode number 1. If you haven't, we'll link that in the show notes here, so I'd appreciate it if you went back and checked that out. Today's going to be a little bit more of a informational episode. I'm very fortunate in what I do for a living, helping entrepreneurs, small businesses, self-employed people with side hustles, all those things, start their business and see that through to growing it and making it everything that they want it to be. But the question I get asked the most probably is, where do I start? And so today we're going to go through the do's and don'ts of what to do and what not to do when you're starting a side hustle, your own business, or an entrepreneurial journey.
The Mark Big Show.
So obviously everyone, when they come in, they're like, hey, I have this idea, I have this business, I have this venture I want to start. The first question they ask is, where do I start? And so for me, that usually starts with the legal and the accounting side of things. So obviously I'm not an attorney, can't give legal advice, so I'll defer that to all the attorneys. But I do think, depending on what the business is that you may be involved in or the side hustle that you're starting, it may benefit you to sit down with an attorney just to ask some questions, what your legal ramifications may be, do I have liability here, et cetera, et cetera. So figuring out that side of things is probably important. From the accounting side of things, some of the important questions to have answered: how should I be structured? A lot of people read things online and they're asking, should I be an LLC? Should I be incorporated? Should I be this? Should I be that? So it's important to sit down with an advisor or an accountant or business advisor that knows the ins and outs of each one. Number one, what type of protections they may provide you by incorporating a certain way or not, and then also the taxation of each of those entities. LLCs can be taxed multiple ways, so it's important to know, just because I'm an LLC, am I going to be taxed differently, the same, how that all works. And having someone that does that every day, such as the great advisors at Biggs Financial Services, shameless plug, sit down with you and explain, here's what happens if you do this. If you become an LLC, you can tax it as an S Corp. Do I want to be a partnership if I have multiple partners? Is it just going to be me? So all these things are important for you to figure out up front before you decide to go get your licensing and all those types of things. So let's just use the example of a contractor, for example. Here where we live locally, after you got those things ironed out, you would want to go get some liability insurance. And obviously an insurance person can tell you what type of coverage you may need, what type of coverage may be unnecessary, et cetera, et cetera. You can figure out all those things. From there, the way that it works here locally, depending on the city or the county that you may be doing business in, you may have certain licenses that you have to go apply for in the areas that you're doing business. However, if you're going to be an online-based business, for example, obviously that's not going to be necessary. So there's all kinds of different ins and outs that if you sit down with a accountant, advisor, something like that, that does this every single day, they can explain to you, here's the things that will benefit your specific situation, your specific type of business if you go this route or that route. From there, they can also tell you, if you're a product-based business like a t-shirt sales company, for example, here's some certain deductions that you need to make sure that from a tax standpoint you're keeping up with. Obviously, the cost of materials and the equipment and those types of things that you purchase, those are obviously going to be deductible, but once again, sitting with an expert that knows the ins and outs, they can explain to you, here's the small things that you may not think of that you need to make sure from day one that you're tracking. And one of the things people ask all the time, how can I get to where I don't pay any taxes? That's obviously, nobody wants to pay taxes. Everybody hates taxes, me included. But the thing is, the number one thing that I've seen is people just don't keep good enough records. So that's my number one piece of advice for everybody that's starting out, whether it's going to be a humongous business, whether it's just going to be a side hustle that you do part-time, doesn't really matter. You have to find a system that works for you up front so that you can start to track the things that you're doing from an income standpoint and the money that you're spending so that you can actually report those correctly to your accountant to file your taxes properly. So once again, this list that I'm going to give you today of all the things to do / don't do, they're not in any particular order. I'm just in the financial field, so that's the first thing that came to mind. One of the next things to question yourself on, depending on what type of business or side hustle you may be starting, is, do I need equipment? If so, what type of equipment does that look like? Do I need, space to store this? Do I need equipment that I need to buy offline? Is it stuff that I can, piece together locally? Do I even need equipment? Those are things that are going to be industry specific, so I won't speak to any of those things specifically, but, you need to start making kind of an itemized, detailed list of, here are the things that I'm going to need. I'll take my business, for example. When I started my own business, I have 4 offices in here. And so my thought was, I'm going to need 4 desks. I need phone systems. I need internet, all those types of little things that until you get down to the nitty gritty, you may not think of when you're thinking about, from a high level, what type of business or side hustle you may be starting. From there, you need to decide, okay, I'm an online-based business, so I don't necessarily need a location. But let's say you're going to be a retail location. Location is one of the most important things that I think people don't consider enough when starting a business that's going to have a brick and mortar location. Obviously, if you're going to do something online only, this doesn't really apply. But if you're going to have a physical space and a physical location wherever you're located to start your business, you really need to do some due diligence before deciding, hey, yeah, I'm going to go start my business here. I'm going to go put my shop here. I'm going to go do this or that there. Because anybody that knows anything about real estate, the number one thing is location, location, location. And you can say it again, location, location, location. If your business is not in the proper location, it could really hinder you before you even open your doors. Now, take, once again, my industry, for example. I'm more of what's called a destination type business. So my business doesn't necessarily rely on drive-by traffic in order to attract customers. My business is more marketing based and referral based. So my location, while still important, obviously you want something that's nice, clean looking, easy to get in and out of, easy to get to in whatever city or county that you're in. Obviously, all those things are important, but it's not as important for me from a traffic count standpoint as if I were going to run a fast food restaurant. All depends on the sector of business that you're in to determine what type of location do I need? How much square footage do I need? What type of lease am I going to negotiate? Many times this will involve a commercial real estate agent that has experience negotiating leases related to your type of business. Because in my minimal experience in commercial real estate, leases can look different regardless of what city or state you're located in. But you want to make sure that you have someone on your side that's an expert there too, to sit down with you and explain the ins and outs. Says, hey, as the business owner or the lessee on this lease, here are the things that you're responsible for in addition to your rent. Because once again, going back to projecting financially, those are going to be things that you need to take into consideration before you launch. And so location, 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 can't say it enough, is of uber importance, regardless if you're a drive-by type business or you're a destination business like the one that I'm in the financial industry. So that's the next big important thing to understand is how much square footage do I need for what I want? Do I need to be in a high traffic count location? Can I be tucked away in an office somewhere, not necessarily on the main drag in whatever city or state that you're in? Will that work for me? Another thing to consider before we move on into the financial aspect of planning for your business or your side hustle is if you are going to lease a spot, am I going to be responsible for building that out? Or is the person that owns the building going to build out the space the way that I want it and have it turnkey ready for when I open my doors day one? Those are important things that I think fall through the cracks often. You wouldn't think they would because they're obviously of utmost importance, a lot of money involved, but it's not negotiated enough and talked about enough in my personal opinion. So that's one thing that from a planning perspective, you need to know these things going into it. That leads right into the next probably most important thing, if not the most important thing, is the finances. What type of business are you in is going to determine what kind of cash flow you need. Am I going to need to be reordering products every so often? Or am I just going to be responsible for leasing and I don't have a product, but I have ongoing costs like utilities, maintenance, my insurance? All these things are something, and you can probably do this yourself, but probably doesn't hurt to have another set of eyes on it by an advisor, an accountant, somebody that you trust financially, to sit down and say, all right, let me project all my overhead that I know going into it. That way you can start to project, okay, if I'm a product-based business, I can sell X amount of widgets in order to cover my monthly cost. Well, then if I want to make X amount on top of that, how many widgets do I have to sell each month? All those things are, once again, not talked about enough in my personal opinion. People want to shrink the overhead costs when they're planning and inflate the numbers that they think they can do from a sales standpoint. Whereas for me personally, I'm not a worrywart and I'm not a doomsday person, but also you have to plan for worst case scenario. So especially like in my case, when I was leaving and starting my own business, if this business failed, my kids don't have a place to sleep. I don't have a place to sleep. I don't have a way to put food on the table for them. So for me to not plan properly is not an option. And so if you're going to go out on your own, whether it be a side hustle, start a self-employment / new career, or start an entrepreneurial venture for yourself and your family, you got to plan properly. And one of the things to do there is plan for the worst. Can you operate and live and survive if your business does 25% of what you're actually projecting it to do? Can it survive if you do 50% of what you're actually projecting to do? Not that it's going to be that, but if you're only planning for the best case scenario, I don't think that's the best plan. And so, in baseball, they always told us if you fail to plan, you're going to plan to fail. And it's kind of the same concept here. You got to plan for all different scenarios. Life happens, business ebbs and flows, good economies, bad economies, depending on the industry you're in. So financially speaking, you need to know up front how much it's going to cost to even get the doors open to start. Is that money going to come from personal savings? Is that money going to come from a line of credit? Are you going to bring on partners that give you money in order to get the venture started? And in exchange for that, they take a piece of ownership. There's all kinds of different things. And once again, if you're just starting a little side hustle, maybe this doesn't apply to you. But if you're opening a brick and mortar retail location or an office location, this is a big piece of the puzzle. How are you going to take the funds how are you going to get the funds, number one, in order to get the doors even open? And then do you have enough cushion for those first 6 months, 12 months, where if business is slow, you still got to keep the wheels turning and the doors open and those types of things to get to the fruitful season. Many things that people just don't think about. They're running through and they're just like, oh, if I sell X of these, that equals this number, I make this much, I'm good. And if you're, even for a side hustle, and it's not going to be your main source of income, that's just not the proper way to plan. All right, so once you have the financial side of things figured out, the next question I think is, who am I going to market to? And that's the number one thing I think from a numbers guy like myself that I probably didn't have ironed out as much up front is, who is my targeted customer? Who do I want to reach? Who is my targeted client? Specific. And at first, obviously, when you're opening a business, you're like, I'll take anybody and everybody. And that's great. And most businesses are probably like that. But in order to get those people in, you have to identify who your target audience is. And then once you can identify that and section them off into a demographic or a cohort, so to speak, how do I go after them? And how do I get in front of them? Which comes into the marketing aspect of things. Obviously, in today's age, I really don't care what type of business or side hustle you're going to be in. If you're going to want to market and reach any type of the masses, you have to be on social media. I think we all know that. There's probably 6 to 8 core platforms that I think you need to be on, even if you're not great at it. Just putting information and things about your business out there in order to get in front of those people. If you continue to churn and put that information out and put feelers out and get in front of those people, they will eventually become customers of yours or clients of yours, if obviously they are your target cohort demographic, so to speak. But in order to grow a business in the way that most people would want to, even from a side hustle standpoint, even if you're a contractor, even if you're just a guy that is a handyman, you still have to be able to put yourself out there and get in front of those people, so that while your customer base is building, before you start getting those referrals, you're getting that new blood. New blood's the lifeblood of every single business. And so in order to continue to grow and move the ball down the field, you got to be able to understand, how do I put myself in front of the right people? And myself included, I think when I started, I was just like, I'm just going to throw this stuff out here and just see what happens. That's not the proper plan either. So going into it with some type of marketing plan, and I'm not a marketer, but I know that this stuff's important. So being able to identify your target audience, your target client, your target customer, whatever that looks like for your business or your side hustle or your profession, whatever that is, how do I put out information, content, educational things in order to reach those people and let them know that I can solve whatever problem it is that they may have? And for me, once again, in the financial industry, it's how can I connect more with my advisor from a standpoint of getting advice, making sure my returns are the best that they can possibly be, making sure my tax bill is as little as it can possibly be. There's all these different things that you can never get to if you don't get in front of the right people. So identify your target audience, your target cohort, section them off, and figure out from a marketing perspective, how do I get in front of them? How do I reach them? And for some demographics, it's still going to be radio, TV, some of those older, so to speak, mindset type marketing tactics, but they're still important depending on what you're in. And for some people, it's going to be social media only, and that's great. Some people, email marketing is going to work. Some people, it's not. It all depends on the industry and the sector that you're going to start your business in. If you're product-based, service-based, all those things. But the key to the whole thing is identifying who you want to be your customer/client and how do I get in front of them. Putting a plan in place before you even launch, open your doors, all those types of things is a key component that I think, myself included, didn't think of properly before I started. And so before you even open your doors, launch your website, do all those types of things, all these things that we just hit on, I think you need to sit down and have a true hard look and a conversation with yourself. And obviously, depending on what sector you're in, do I need to consult an attorney? I should probably consult at least my accountant, maybe my financial advisor. I may need an insurance agent. I may need a real estate agent if you're going to negotiate a lease like we talked about earlier. But all these things need to be part of the plan before you launch your side hustle, before you switch to being a self-employed person, before you launch your business and open your doors, all those types of things, just some key components that you have to consider as the owner or the person that's going to run the side hustle before you can launch and be successful. So I know that was very, very educational today, a little different than last time, but I hope this information can really sit with you, because there's tons of people now, more so than ever with the expansion of the internet and technology, either have a side hustle, want to start a business, have thought about it, considered it, would love to, but just haven't made the jump yet. All these things are not going to be a foolproof list, and this is not everything to consider. Obviously, there's a lot of industry-specific things that I'm not going to cover, but all these things from a high level are things that I think any business owner or person with a side hustle needs to consider before they ever launch or open the doors. So I hope this information finds you well. I can't wait to see you guys again. Until next time, for the Mark Big Show, we'll see you soon.